Solitaire Rose Radio 64, Series in Review, Master of Kung Fu, Part 1. I've been talking for a few months about how we were going to start a new podcast, and I decided to kind of fold it into Solitaire Rose Radio because it's just easier that way. There is another new podcast starting a little after the first of the year. It is called Bad Advice with Cory and Wolfie Be Bad. We're actually recording it a little later today. It'll be a humor podcast. But this will be part of the Kray Z Comics and Stories / Solitaire Rose Radio / Solo Joe family, where we go over comic book series from the past and review them. Not just talking about what we liked and what we didn't, but also try and get an idea of what was going on around the series, our thoughts of the series as a whole. I like to think of it as DVD commentary for a comic book series. And the one that I picked first was Master of Kung Fu. It's going to last quite a while because there were a little over 100 issues published of the comic, plus giant size issues, plus other things that get folded into the series. And Joe and I are going to be using the omnibuses as kind of how we're going to read the series, because it's locked away in boxes in a storage unit for me to go and dig them up. And this is the only way that people can actually buy the series now, unless you want to go hunting for back issues. So it's Joe and I, but it's not a Kray Z Comics and Stories. It's a different sort of animal. And here it is. Well, this is the first episode of the new series, Joe.
I'm a little gobsmacked. I mean, look at this. Plush seating, soundproof room, serious microphones. I mean, why didn't you put such money into our normal podcast?
Money? I stole all this stuff from the U of M. You know, the semester's over, and all the students went home, leaving all their stuff lying around. So, you know,
that's why you are a rat bastard. So
yes, it is.
Why are you bothering me here on our normal non-podcast time? What exactly is your goal for this new series here?
What we're going to be doing, and the name of the series was actually voted on by people of Twitter and Facebook. The name of the series is Solitaire Rose Series in Review. And what we're going to do, we're going to go through comic series, kind of like we're the DVD commentary for them. So there's going to be nothing but spoilers. If you have not read these books, you will be spoiled on them. We're going to talk about...
And if you haven't read these books, they're good. You will be spoiled on them.
Yes. We're going to talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that we've known about, each issue. And Joe's not going to be on every episode. For some, we may have the creators of the series on with me. There are some I may do on my own that Joe hasn't read or Joe doesn't want to read. It's going to be an experiment. It's a new idea I have. But Joe's helping me start out, and we are going to do the long-promised Master of Kung Fu,
which I have never read until I actually bought the Marvel Omnibus that just came out. And I believe 1 is out, 2 and 3 are coming, and there's a 4th one that doesn't deal with Shang-Chi.
No, what it's going to be, there are going to be the 4 Master of Kung Fu that will reprint the entire series. There will then be 2 that reprint the magazine, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, which had Shang-Chi for the first few issues, but then it turned into it was more with Iron Fist, Sons of the Tiger, White Tiger, and other Kung Fu type things.
Marvel went Kung Fu mad.
Well, I want to talk a little about what was going on in society at the time. When Enter the Dragon hit,
It was a Bruce Lee movie. It came out in the U.S. actually after Bruce Lee had died. Bruce Lee had made some Hong Kong action films after trying to break into the American film market. And really the only thing he did in America that people know of where he got to, be a name was Green Hornet, where he played Kato. And Green Hornet only lasted a year. So he went back to Hong Kong to make action films. And they were doing so well over there, and they were starting to come to the U.S. in what are known as grindhouse theaters. And the reason they were called that is because they would run cheap movies. They'd just run them over and over and over for 24 hours in a row. And people would come in, and there were horror movies and spaghetti westerns, and then they got their hands on what were known as kung fu movies, most of them by the Shaw Brothers. But an American company saw that Bruce Lee was a star over there and made a co-production called Enter the Dragon. And when Lee passed away, the movie still hadn't been released in the U.S. When it was released in the U.S., it was a huge success. And it really opened up martial arts films as kind of a fad, to the point where even in one of the James Bond movies, it was the Roger Moore movie, he fought a person who was dressed in Bruce Lee's yellow tracksuit from Game of Death to show that, well, James Bond can beat up any of these martial arts guys. But Marvel wanted to get on the bandwagon because Marvel was one of those companies, they always have been, where there's a fad, we want to jump on it.
That's a good 10-4, good buddy.
Oh, Razorback, the CB villain. You can also look at a lot of Marvel books in 1976, and there are sharks in them on the cover.
Sharks!
When The Exorcist went big, Marvel had Son of Satan, and Ghost Rider was, had made a deal with the devil, and there were satanic cults everywhere. But they very much were into this. So Steve Englehart and Jim Starlin pitched an idea for a martial arts series to Roy Thomas, who was the editor-in-chief of Marvel at the time. The other big fad that was happening in comics were kind of a revival of the pulp characters because of the success of Conan. So you had Doc Savage, you had over at DC, you had the Shadow, you had the character known in the pulps as the Avenger, but because Marvel owned the copyright to the Avengers, it was called Justice Incorporated. And Marvel had got their hands on the rights for Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu, which was a novel series that had been actually started in 1911, I believe, in the dime magazines back then, and was still fairly popular because of the pulp explosion. So Roy Thomas told them that they could do it if they used the characters from the Fu Manchu series. So they worked the idea, and the idea was that Shang-Chi, who is the main character, was the son of Fu Manchu. And they did another thing that happened at the time, they usually did not start with the number one issue until a series had kind of proven itself. And even then, they wouldn't have a number one issue. There was books like Marvel Premiere, Marvel Spotlight, Marvel Feature, where they would try a series to see if it would sell. But another thing that they often did was they would have a series, put a character in it, and then if it became popular enough, they would switch the name of the series. Joe, do you know why companies would do that?
Nope.
Second-class mailing.
Ah.
For magazines, you buy a second-class mail permit, which means that, okay, you pay a fee and you can send the magazine via second-class mail, which was as fast as first-class mail but cheaper. And it was something that was set up for magazines. And one of the things Marvel had always done was, rather than cancel a book and start a new one, they would switch the title of the book. So it's, okay, these issues are Amazing Adventures. Now, Oh, it's Amazing Adult Adventures. Now it's Amazing Adult Fantasy. Oh, now it's Amazing Fantasy. So what they did, they took the reprint series, Special Marvel Edition. First 4 issues had been reprints of Thor, and they were square bound, which they were a 25-cent comic that was 64 pages. It went down to a regular 32-page comic that then, when it made that switch with issue 5, started reprinting Sergeant Fury stories, which to me is kind of weird because Sergeant Fury had pretty much become a reprint comic by that time anyway. They would do a new story and then a reprint, and a new story and a reprint. But I guess it was selling well enough that they started a second series that reprinted. But with issue 15, Sergeant Fury went away, and it became Special Marvel Edition, featuring the Master of Kung Fu.
Hooray!
The Hands of Shang-Chi, or Shang-Chi,
Actually,
Master of Kung Fu.
His whole body was in there, just not his hands, I don't want you to confuse those with the Marvel horror books coming out at the time. This is the martial arts craze,
And that was the name of the series, The Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. Which, they couldn't just call it Master of Kung Fu. They couldn't call it Shang. They had to have that. I don't know why. But if you open up the first issue, Hands of Shang-Chi, nope, not in there. Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. And the first issue is his origin. There is a lot packed into this story. It's written by Steve Englehart, drawn by Jim Starlin, and inked by Al Milgrom. And it was... Starlin and Milgrom worked together a lot. They worked together on this. They worked together on Captain Marvel. They worked together on the Warlock series. They were pretty close friends. They have worked together off and on ever since. And in the first issue, Shang-Chi has been raised by Fu Manchu to be the perfect weapon. And Fu Manchu has told him that he is a scientist and he is a leader of men. And basically it's Shang-Chi does not know that Fu Manchu is a villain. And he is sent out to kill Dr. Petrie, one of the characters from the Fu Manchu novels. The 2 main characters in the Fu Manchu novels were, of course, Fu Manchu, but his adversaries were Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie. And in it, Shang-Chi kills Dr. Petrie, and in doing so, finds out that Fu Manchu is outside of where he was outside of, the compound. Fu Manchu is considered one of the greatest villains of all time, who uses elixirs to stay perpetually young. And one of the things about the book is that they are actually using the timeline from the novels. The first time Nayland Smith dealt with Fu Manchu was 1911, and this is 1973, so Nayland Smith is in his 60s. And there's a lot of fighting in this, of course, but they pack a lot of plot into the 15 pages. And the main fight is against a sumo wrestler and then a giant ape who has been experimented on. So you've got 2 big fight sequences, and Shang-Chi vows that he will destroy his father's empire.
And that was one of the things that kind of struck me as odd, because you figure, okay, how old is Shang-Chi supposed to be here?
He's supposed to be 19.
Okay, so for 19 years, and it takes one fight with a sumo wrestler, and you suddenly decide, my father is evil. And
it was what happened after he killed Dr. Petrie, when Nayland Smith explains, he says, I killed this man of great evil. And Nayland Smith, I'll tell you about Fu Manchu. It was 1911, and I was an agent of the British government. And so he's going to sit there and believe,
he's going to believe a guy he just met versus a man he grew up his entire life. This is one of those 70s cliches where in order to get the series going, he has to make the switch now.
Yes.
Whereas nowadays, he might be doubtful, and then maybe go a few issues, and then discover, yeah, my dad is a real son of a bitch, and then make the choice to go against him. Because one of the things that comics of this era do, when you're evil, and you revel that you are evil. Yet, we know people who are evil don't think they're evil, they think they're right. Evil people don't see themselves as evil. They always have a rationale for doing what they're doing. And Fu Manchu gets to it by the time you get to the confrontation between the two. And he explains why he does what he does, and he talks about his past history. And then, of course, right away, nope, they're implacable enemies. And, of course, Fu Manchu, every evil on this planet is mine at my command. It's like, yeah, you wouldn't think of it as evil, but, we accept it because, they're wily Chinese people. Obviously they're going to meet and have flowery speeches and not like each other. We're used to that. We watched, who was in that show, Kung Fu on television?
Kane. It was
David Carradine.
Yes.
And so we accept that. It wouldn't necessarily play out that way today. So you almost have to be, you got to forget, this is a 1970s comic. So as you're reading it, it's sudden. And, to me, it was hard to buy. I mean, I did because you realize if you didn't, the rest of the series falls apart. But, he just accepts after 19 years this guy who he loves more than life itself is evil. And we are now enemies. Yeah, whatever. So it's a beginning, and it's 70s.
And another thing that I want to point out is this was a bi-monthly book. It's hard for us to imagine a book being bi-monthly in this era.
Unless you read a lot of Image types. Whoa. Sorry.
Yeah, but they're not supposed to be bi-monthly. They just come out when they want.
For the regular series.
But most Marvel books, when they would start out, would be bi-monthly. It was pretty rare in the early 70s for a book to start out as monthly, unless it was something that had been proven to sell well. And Master of Kung Fu became monthly very quickly. It became monthly with issue 19. And if you think, that's 4 issues, the X-Men was bi-monthly from issue 94 to issue 108. So that was almost 3 years before sales went up enough that they said, okay, we're going to make it monthly. Marvel Tales, which reprinted Spider-Man stories, would come out 8 times a year. It would be bi-monthly except for the summer when it would come out in June, July, and August, because sales were better then. The whole premise of the series is set up in this first issue where Shang-Chi is going to be out in the real world fighting his father's machinations.
Evil!
And Fu Manchu gives a speech at the end where, so be it, Shang-Chi, leave my lair in peace and respect, but never attempt in the near or distant future to alter the decision you have made here. Once I promised Dr. Petrie he would never fear me again upon my honor as a Mandarin. Yet, Mandarins have no place in the vicious struggle for world supremacy being waged today. Every evil on this planet is at my command. Therefore, son or no, henceforth they will all be directed toward your doom. And the thing to remember about this is Fu Manchu is a very well-established character in fiction. There were the novels, there were movies, to the point where the whole yellow peril is embodied in this character. And one of the things that we don't understand, being almost 100 years removed, is, how we think of the illegal immigrants now? That's how the Chinese immigrants were thought of in the early 1900s.
And if you go back and read those Sax Rohmer novels, you'll find they did portray him most consistently that way. He's a brilliant, calculating master villain. He aspires to rule the world. And as the series progresses, the character, he deteriorates, loses his nobler qualities. But that's far down the way. We don't want to give all these spoilers away.
But he's also one step ahead of everybody. He's the villain who has thought of everything.
You know, and part of me, the continuity geek, thinks as the series went on, I mean, Fu Manchu was very, I'm trying to think, he was very powerful, and you'd think of all the stuff he did, and we know why, because he was first published there in, Special Marvel Edition 15, but he should have had his fingers throughout the Marvel Universe. And what's surprising is that he didn't. He kind of controlled his own area. And we do see some superhero crossovers here and there. But you would think such a character would have run afoul of Doom or Magneto or, of course, Yellow Claw or some of the other world conquerors at the time. And to my knowledge, as I was reading these first 10 issues, they never really acknowledged that. And they could have, just say, he's worked hard to avoid detection by other so-called world conquerors. But that's not the way the Marvel Universe worked back then. Nowadays, you try to make references to things happening in other books and, try to be part of the whole universe. Well, in this case, that wasn't even on their minds.
They kept the book fairly separate.
Kind of like they did the early X-Men.
Yes.
They just existed in their own little world, and never mind the fact the things they were fighting were universe-threatening and world-conquering. If you were just reading Spider-Man or Avengers, you never knew what Avengers or Master of Kung Fu was up to.
And I think a lot of it is because back in the 70s, a lot of the creators just... Now we have, the writers' summits where the writers get together and go, okay, here's the overall direction of the Marvel Universe for the next 5 years. How do you want to tie in with this? What are the big events that are coming? And looking for those opportunities. And during this time, we had the Avengers Defenders crossover because Steve Englehart was writing both of them.
Now, I got a quick question for you, Cory. What was your first exposure to Master of Kung Fu?
I've talked in the past about when I was a kid, one of the babysitters I had, her older sister's boyfriend read comics and would give them to me. But he wasn't reading, like Spider-Man and Hulk, and he read the stuff that was more on the fringes, more aimed toward adult readers. And he gave me some of the last Paul Galassi issues of Master of Kung Fu. But also in the letters pages, whenever it came up in other comics, they would talk about how great Master of Kung Fu was. So by 77, 78, when I was able to buy my own comics, I would buy that. And it was a very different book than the other Marvel books. Yes, there were fight scenes, but it wasn't connected. There weren't supervillains. It was more espionage, more spy-oriented stuff. Now, in these early issues, it's more of a kung fu movie come to life. It's later on that the book becomes kind of philosophy and spy stories.
See, for me, the first issue was in the Marvel team of crossover with Spider-Man, Black Widow, Nick Fury, and Shang-Chi versus Viper, Boomerang, Silver Samurai. A big four-parter that was just fantastic. And then, like you said, later on, I picked up the later issues where it was more philosophy orientated, and that's what I go off that as my introduction to the character. Just go back to the 70s stuff. It's really kind of, you see a little bit of it there, but it's more the fish out of water story, especially when you get into Marvel edition number 16 and we find out essentially he just walked outside in his traditional garb, barefoot, and he's in the middle of Central Park.
Not only is he a fish out of water, but they portray him as wise but naive. He's learned all of the Eastern philosophy, but when it comes to what the outside world is like, he has no idea, which was very much like the martial arts films and the TV series Kung Fu. Which, if you've ever watched the TV series Kung Fu, it's this weird mix of kind of a Kung Fu martial arts film with a Western. Because Kane, the lead character, was raised in a Chiloan monastery and then is The series is set in the American West. Would have loved to sit in on those meetings where they said, okay, yeah, these kung fu movies are doing good, but, we don't have enough Westerns on. The second issue is very much that fish out of water, and the main villain in it is his brother, Midnight. But if you read it, it is a lot like a kung fu movie of the time, where it's just setups for fights. There's no real plot other than Shang-Chi is trying to learn about the outside world, and Fu Manchu has sent his brother against him. Another thing you'll notice in these issues is the narration is all first person. Shang-Chi is telling you the story. Everything is from his point of view. Now, they fail at this from time to time when they do cutaways to things that there's no way he would have seen or known. The best example is when we find out the origin of Midnight, and Fu Manchu says, go, and, all right, your turn, go after your brother. And the thing that really separates this from a regular Marvel, setup, fight scene, subplot, setup, fight scenes, subplot, is that the narration is very much about the philosophy of the fight and why the fight has to happen. The fight also takes a long time. This is a long fight scene. Let's see.
Yeah, it's almost like a choreographed storyboard. They sat down and they might have figured it out to make it look and feel like it is a fight, not just, hit over.
Yeah, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4.
Is that a 12-panel page?
7, 8, 9, 10. It's a 12-page fight in a 17-page story.
One page is 12 panels.
Yes.
We talked about 9 panels in the past. This one's, it's amazing. And at no time do you get thrown out of the fight, because they did. Who's artist in this thing?
This is Jim Starlin. Jim Starlin did the first 3 issues.
He choreographed it well.
And the other thing about that is when you think Jim Starlin, you think big cosmic stuff. This is ground level fight scenes. Very well choreographed, very well put together. And one of the things that comes to mind when I get to the end, and here's this character who's the opposite of Shang-Chi. He's his brother, but he knew that Fu Manchu was evil, and he's okay with it, and he's almost like the mirror image. He's killed at the end of the story and does not come back. Which makes me think that they were, okay, this is a fad, it won't last a long time, let's ride it as long as we can, maybe it'll last 3-4 years.
Yeah, even I thought that was like, holy crap! The sound of his neck snapping was like the crack of doom.
And that was another thing that happened a lot in 70s Marvel comics. The villain didn't just get beat and thrown in jail. Something would happen, some accident during the fight would happen, and he would die. He would fall off something, or he would get trapped in something, so that the hero didn't kill him, but he died. And I know in Spider-Man that happened so much that it became almost hilarious how they would, okay, Dr. Octopus was not blown up in a nuclear bomb explosion. He wrapped himself in his anti-radiation arms and survived, being at the heart of an atomic explosion. But they really go a long way in showing that Shang-Chi doesn't kill. The villains die, but he doesn't kill.
Yeah, he's not on purpose.
And then the next issue is issue 17. It's no longer Special Marvel Edition. They have changed it over to Hands of Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu. And if you open up, the name of the book is Master of Kung Fu, because you'll see Stanley Presents Master of Kung Fu. They don't reprint the Indicta, but the Indicta, it was Master of Kung Fu. Much like how the X-Men on the cover were the Uncanny X-Men, but in the Indicta it was just X-Men for the longest time. until they said, oh, well, we're calling this Uncanny X-Men, let's put it in there. That was a very Marvel thing to do. This is the first appearance of Blackjack Tar, who is the right-hand man for Nayland Smith. He's not in the novels. He's a character created for the series itself, and he's, in this story, portrayed as being almost as big as the Hulk.
Oh, how can you not love a man named Blackjack Tar?
The other thing is, if you read the comic, they do a really cool thing for the first, let me see how many pages. 1, 2, 3.
3.
First 3 pages where we're seeing what's going on with Shang-Chi, and we're seeing the training of Blackjack Tar. So it's side by side. Something that you probably could not do in a movie, but you can do in a comic. Also, Joe, the three jerks that Shang-Chi fights.
Yeah.
That's Steve, Jim, and Al. And they're drawn to look like Steve Englehart, Jim Starlin, and Al Meltzer.
That's funny.
This was also Jim Starlin's last issue. Starlin only did the first 3. And in this, we've got Nayland Smith thinks of Shang-Chi as the evil Fu Manchu's latest weapon against him. And that's what leads to our fight between Blackjack Tar and Shang-Chi.
Silence, Tak. Shang-Chi is a living weapon. You are a wrestler. Sorry, Fu Manchu's got to make that obligatory appearance because he's always in the background doing something. Although a lot of times when we see him, we kind of get the attitude that whatever Shang-Chi's doing is not heavily on Fu Manchu's mind because he's doing whatever. He's got other things he's doing. Fu Manchu just seems to be, I don't know, just happens.
And again, he's still just kind of wandering through life. So we're getting parts of the supporting cast. They're still trying to figure out what to do with the series. There is a 2-page spread about halfway through the comic. And Joe, do you have the omnibus there?
I does.
Okay, could you open to that 2-page spread? It's on page 66 and 67.
Oh, okay. Whoa.
You know why there were so many 2-page spreads during this period of time at Marvel?
Just to fill in and keep the dreaded deadline doom away?
Not to keep the dreaded deadline doom away, to cut the budget.
Yep.
This was usually a page, it would be a 17-page comic, but you'd only be paid for 16 pages. And one of the pages you would have to kind of turn on its side and draw it because rather than 17 pages, so it's okay, you're doing 16, but one of the pages needs to fill 2 pages of the comic. And a lot of the creators would just go, well, I'm not going to draw, I'm just going to do a 1 page that could be spread out over 2 pages. And they would usually plan it so it would be the center of the comic, so that when you would open the comic, when it would just fall, that would be the thing that you would see. So you're flipping through the comic, you get to that, and you go, oh, cool, look at that.
You don't get the same effect in the omnibus, so don't try.
Although it's a very cool, 2-page spread. The other thing about this story is it's Shang-Chi going to see Nayland Smith, and Nayland Smith has all of these death traps that keep him safe. So it's very much, an old martial arts movie trope of going through the fortress. Nayland Smith has trap
in the middle
doors.
of New York, that we had.
Yes. Trap doors, robot guards, and then we get the fight with Blackjack Tar. And it's not a long fight. Even though Blackjack Tar is on the cover, the fight is 2.5 pages.
Yep.
And the end of it is the beginning of the warming of relations between Shang-Chi and Nayland Smith. One of the things that made Shang-Chi turn against his father was Nayland Smith showed that Fu Manchu crippled him by having his legs crushed and destroyed. And Shang-Chi says, no, what's keeping you in the wheelchair isn't your injury, it's your mind thinking that you cannot stand. So very much that Eastern philosophy, mysticism type thing that was really big in the U.S. during that time.
And, of course, he leaves through the window cryptically, until we meet again. And then you turn the page, and you got a letters column,
Yep.
at least in the omnibus.
Yep, the letters column was actually one of the things that Don McGregor said. If you got a lot of typewritten letters, your book was probably not going to last too long. Because most of the letters that they got for the books that sold real well were from kids, so they were handwritten. Master of Kung Fu got typewritten letters early on. And if you read these letters columns, one of the things you'll notice as it goes further on, Ralph Macchio, who became an editor at Marvel and was then like editor-in-chief of the Ultimate Universe, he had letters in it all the time.
And then he went on later to become like number 3 guy on Happy Days and became a star.
Wrong.
Wrong, Ralph?
Yeah.
Oh, Ralph.
And not the Karate
Ralph
Kid.
Macchio. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Here I thought I made a connection, but I guess never mind.
The other thing on the letters page, they say, all right, this book is taking off, and Jim Starlin's going to be moving on to some other book, probably Captain Marvel. Steve Englehart's not going to be on too much longer. It's really successful. Issue 18 does not have a main villain on the cover. It is also the first issue drawn by Paul Gulacy. And you notice a big difference when you see that splash page. Starlin stuff is very standard Marvel. Al Milgrom has a certain inking style. They kept Al Milgrom, but when you look at Paul Gulacy's stuff, his early stuff, he's still, his body forms are a little twisted, a little off when he's doing the poses. But the way he uses shadow and the way he draws musculature, and he uses more photo reference. And as he goes on, his stuff becomes really good. He was heavily influenced by Jim Sternenko. And you start to see that in some of the layouts of the pages where he'll use a lot of small panels to show motion and action. This story is about Nayland Smith says, all right, we're going to have an alliance. I still don't trust you. But Fu Manchu is bringing in these drugs into Florida. If you're really wanting to fight him, go down there and stop him from bringing in the drugs.
Up to Florida!
And yeah, as a TSA agent, I bet when you were reading this, you kind of cringed because it's Fu Manchu, Chiang Chai, he just kind of sneaks onto a plane.
Not really. It was the 70s, you know. I don't think we even had metal detectors yet. That didn't happen until a few hijackings a little later. So, no, we got to forgive him.
And we find out that Fu Manchu is bringing in drugs, but he's doing it in a different way. He is going to put his mimosa, which was, in the novels, it was kind of his mind control hallucinogen drug, into the gasoline supply so that as people are driving, the gas will take over, blah, blah, blah. Joe, could you turn to page 89?
I could. Oh.
There's your first Jim Sternenko influence page. Just a beautiful page.
That needs to be a blacklight poster somewhere.
Very 70s. Very, very 70s. And
now, see, it could be because I had just finished reading Marvel's Supervillain Team Up or whatever it was called. Because Doom did a very similar thing where he had, and he succeeded for the most part, where he, some type of gas that went around the world and everybody now was under Doom's thrall. And all I could think of is like, this is very much in line with that type of how we're going to take over the world, you know. Never mind the fact that not every place in the world uses gasoline, but that again, gasoline was a very hot topic in the 70s because it was being cut off by OPEC. It was, people were in huge lines just to be told there was no gas, because we're all still driving our 2 miles a gallon big gas guzzlers.
And so gas went
it was
from
probably a fear.
gas went from like 35 cents a gallon to $1 a gallon within a matter of a couple of years. And that's kind of what triggered the hyperinflation of the 70s in a lot of ways. Because imagine if, gas now is $1.99. Imagine if by the end of next year it was $6 to $7 a gallon. Everything would cost more because you've got all the transportation costs, and your salary's not going to go up that much. So it was really on people's minds. The other thing about this is the fight scene at the end is Fu Manchu takes one of his men and gives him a drug that makes him super powerful for a very short amount of time.
Wait, you mean Fu Manchu had his fingers in the super secret soldier formula?
No, this was something different.
See, I could really retro this stuff. I mean...
But another thing about it is that it's very much Fu Manchu stays to the background and is sending minions. Fu Manchu is a lot like a number of the major supervillains where he doesn't get his hands dirty. Much like Darkseid, much like Doom when he's done correctly. This was very much a big thing for the supervillains, especially in the pulps, where you would fight through all of their minions to finally get to the main bad guy. And this really reads like what the series was going to be under Steve Englehart. Fu Manchu's got this evil plan. Nayland Smith finds out about it, and he sends Shang-Chi to take it out. So by this issue, the series seems to have gotten some direction. We're in Florida. This is also if you're reading in the omnibus or the actual comic, because they haven't reprinted it anywhere else, you'll see this huge thing on the letters page apologizing for the fact that the comics are now going to be 25 cents.
I'm shocked, I tell you.
And they talk about, okay, we've also got our 75-cent black and white magazines, but prices are going up because the cost of paper is going up, et cetera, et cetera. It's a 2-page letter column, and the end of it, it says, in the next issue, 2 of the most incredible guest stars of the year.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well,
they're in Florida. I wonder who it could be.
Well, the sad thing is only one of the incredible guest stars shows up.
Aww.
Issue 19, the last issue by Steve Englehart, is a Man-Thing story. And this was kind of the first back issue I bought, because I was also a huge fan of Man-Thing. It's an interesting collaboration because in all of the Man-Thing stories, the Man-Thing is kind of a secondary character. In the Shang-Chi stories, it's all from his point of view. So we get his point of view of this character that was, at the time, very big at Marvel. And Shang-Chi is beaten up. He's not doing well. He's being pursued by Fu Manchu's men. He ends up in the Florida swamp and deals with the Man-Thing and this caretaker for the Man-Thing. And it's a really well-done one-issue story. And it kind of shows how the Man-Thing was in his own book, where he doesn't drive the plot. He's just kind of there as it's happening. This is actually one of my favorite early issues, because it goes into Shang-Chi's early days. It's got an extended flashback. It's a weird way to tie into the Marvel Universe, because one of the things they would do in a Marvel book is, within your first 4 or 5 issues, Spider-Man would show up, or the Hulk would show up, or one of the more popular characters, to kind of bring in those readers. And instead, nope, we're bringing in the Man-Thing. He's being chased by 2 Siphon assassins, and the Siphon were kind of Sax Rohmer's versions of ninjas. So, also, again, go to page 114, Joe.
I'm still at 107.
Oh, okay.
104. Boom. There we go.
There's your 2-page spread. Whosoever knows fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch. Now, if you look on the previous page, Shang-Chi is sinking into quicksand. Now, when I was a kid, I thought quicksand was going to be a much bigger deal.
Terrible.
Quicksand was everywhere.
I remember watching Tarzan in one of those movies. Just watch the bad guys sink away and of course I was like, he didn't save them. Well, they are bad guys.
But if you see, he's sinking into the quicksand. Then, after the 2-page spread, he's out of the quicksand. How'd he get out of it? They don't say.
Maybe he was hallucinating it. Maybe that's one of the Man-Thing's powers, to get you out of quicksand.
But this was Steve Englehart's last issue, and it very much, again, derived from that martial arts movie thing where it's not, hooray, I've won, but it's, no, there has been a cost to our victory, and now I'm going to move on. And there's been a philosophical discussion. The character Lu Sun, Man-Thing's kind of caretaker in this issue, is a pacifist. Shang-Chi has the pacifist need, but he's fighting against his father. And as they talk about here, I'll just read the end of it here. The Man-Thing. So the creature has a recognized identity in the world. The Man-Thing, a mindless mockery of a man, wreaking havoc without thought. And how am I so different? When I have contended against my father and his acolytes, I have used only necessary force. I have not abused my skills through the use of violence, but I have not abused them through using them at all. Lu Sun, would you contend against Fu Manchu? And Lu Sun says, would you? There's no answer given. It's that ambiguous ending that Chinese storytelling uses a lot. When you watch if you watch the more highbrow Chinese films, their endings are much more ambiguous, and this kind of captures that. Another thing to know, with issue 19, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, the 75-cent black and white magazine, had started. So we're 4 issues in. What, 1, 2, 3? We're 4 issues in. 5 issues in. The book has gone monthly, and there's a black and white magazine using the character as well. That shows a lot of sales and a lot of popularity for a character that's brand new. I can't think of any Marvel character in the last 20 years that has become that popular that fast. Can you, Joe?
Not like that, no.
They had announced in the letters page that Gary Conway was taking over the book. In issue 20, Gary Conway does the first half of the story, and then Doug Mensch does the second half of the story.
By the way, people, when you get into your omnibus and you're on page 118, do not clip out the Marvel value stamp. They do not have any value anymore.
You'll also see an ad there for Giant Size Fantastic Four #2. Marvel had started doing quarterly giant size books. And that becomes a little important real soon. The issue 20, the first half written by Gary Conway, the second half by Doug Mensch, this was a really bad story.
Oh, where are we? Number 20?
Yep, page 121 in your omnibus. Shang-Chi comes upon a drug dealer in Miami, except he can't be a drug dealer because, it's 70s comics, who, very much your typical drug kingpin who's, I'm going to kill Shang-Chi to prove to Fu Manchu that I'm his man.
And I got to slap around the blonde bimbo.
Yeah. He slaps around his girl, and this, you could tell Gary Conway just didn't have the feel of the book, because while there's the first-person narration in the Shang-Chi parts, when it gets off of Shang-Chi, it's back to the very typical Stan Lee-influenced Marvel narration. And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a Shang-Chi story. Doug Mensch comes in, finishes up the story, where you got the worst Deus Ex Machina ending I've read in a long time. Again, if you go to page 134, there's your 2-page spread. Paul Gulacy did really good work on these 2-page spreads, though. We've also got kind of a supervillain. It's more of a martial arts villain, Corain, who is a sword master. And we get a protracted fight. He has the elixir that lets you live forever. That also gives you extra power, but he messes up. Shang-Chi shoves a pool table in front of him. He trips and falls, tossing a sword which just happens to kill the mobster's girlfriend, and he's dead. This story was a mess, and you could tell that it was, oh crap. Gary couldn't get it done in time. Doug Mensch has taken over the book. Let's figure out a way to get it done. Just did not care for this story at all. The next one, issue 21, is not drawn by Paul Gulacy. It's drawn by Ron Wilson, who's mostly known for his run on Marvel 2-in-1. And Ron Wilson draws Shang-Chi very different. The previous artists draw him kind of as a very musculature 19-year-old. And Paul Gulacy very much influenced by Bruce Lee. And as the series goes on, he draws Shang-Chi more and more like Bruce Lee. But Ron Wilson draws him very kind of like your standard Marvel, built like a Mack truck hero.
So now I got a question here. Do you think they might have screwed up the covers? Because issue 21 has Shang-Chi fighting against a bunch of guys in wetsuits, which happened in issue 20. And then issue 20's cover, he's fighting death-dealing samurai.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that.
Well, the villain from issue 20 is shown on the cover.
Yeah. But, I mean, what happens in the cover of 21 happens in 20. It doesn't happen in issue 21.
So I wonder if 20 was a rejected cover that they went...
no sense wasting it.
Yep, no sense wasting it. This does wrap up the loose ends from the previous issue. Also, this is by Doug Mensch. Gives the villain from the previous issue a little more personality and brings Fu Manchu in.
And once again, we see the appearance of a noble dolphin.
Yes.
Which, if you recall, appeared in Batman the movie, the Adam West one. So, see, these characters do make a comeback.
The other thing is, once again, and this is a theme they go back to over and over, an innocent is killed because he gets involved in the battle between Fu Manchu and Shang-Chi. And this will be a constant theme that they go back to with this series, where the guilt from this makes Shang-Chi want to become a pacifist once Fu Manchu is defeated. They're not using the line yet, but as the series goes on, he resents Nayland Smith for the games of death and deceit.
And once again, you discover just how useful Kung Fu is against a shark underwater.
Yes, and believe it, this was before Jaws, and they've got a 3-page sequence where he fights a shark. We've also got the return of Tak. No, that's not Tak. Tak shows up later.
Yes.
It's one of the drug kingpin's minions. Now, the ending of
Long
the story...
before Millions were very popular.
Yes.
See, this was a groundbreaking series.
One of the things about it, though, is the villain has captured Shang-Chi and is going to kill him, thinking that it will make Fu Manchu happy. And Fu Manchu's not happy. And the reason for that is, you were trying to murder Shang-Chi, that is all. You are more lonely than the viper, and it pains me to soil his fangs, to waste his venom on the likes of you. And it ends with what Doug Mensch saw as his version of Fu Manchu. Know this, Shang-Chi. I have slain this man for one reason. Only Fu Manchu may choose the moment of your death. And that moment shall arrive when it best amuses me. No one else can kill him. It has to be the result of one of Fu Manchu's plans.
Now, if that isn't fatherly love, I don't know what is.
But it sets up the conflict to take it to a different level. So it's almost like Mensch is kind of resetting the series.
Now, on a sidebar, in the letter page, they have a wonderful thing that you can be a Mighty Marvel salesperson, and they list the titles that are currently being published at that time. So you can kind of compare just for the heck of it.
And the interesting thing is you'll see the ones that were bi-monthly have a slash between them and everything. Were the X-Men in this yet? Nope, no X-Men.
No, they're not. No X-Men. But there's your Man Thing. There's Master of Kung Fu.
So you can look at this and see what Marvel's bestsellers were at the time. Avengers, Thor, but also stuff Kid Colt, Dracula, Conan, Werewolf by Night. I don't know of anyone who ever did this. One of the kids I knew joined this just so he could get his comics cheaper.
Buy 12 comics for the price of 8.
Yep.
And then you can sell them and keep the profits. That was a sneaky way for a subscription service.
Yeah. The next issue...
I'd sooner sell grit.
The next issue is a giant-sized Master of Kung Fu. Which, if you look, it was Daredevil didn't have a giant size at this time. What other big ones didn't have? Dracula had a giant size. Avengers had a giant size. Thor didn't. Thor wasn't selling enough for a giant-sized Thor. Master of Kung Fu was selling well enough that it's okay, we're going to add another series, and it's going to be quarterly. And this one is drawn by Paul Gulacy, which, maybe that's why Ron Wilson did the previous issue, because this was an extra long story. One of the things it says 5 all-new sagas. Well, no, there weren't 5 all-new sagas. There was a 3-part story, a short story drawn by P. Craig Russell. Is it P. Craig Russell who drew in this one?
Yeah, but he just said Craig Russell. He didn't put the P on his name yet.
So you've got a 3-parter by
Ron
Paul
Wilson
Gulacy.
and Mike Esposito did one.
Yep. So there were 5 chapters.
Yeah.
The first one is a pretty typical Fu Manchu has a new villain to face Shang-Chi with on Shang-Chi's birthday. So it's very much, this is your birthday, I'm going to kill you on your birthday for, the symmetry of it. Which was,
you thought I was tough to shop for my birthday. Man, there is an awesome birthday gift.
One other thing I want to point out is the coloring of both Fu Manchu and Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi's kind of colored a little more yellow than a regular character than would be normal. But Fu Manchu, he's just flat out pale yellow. You could not get away with that today. That would be frighteningly racist. The Craig Russell story is very short. And looking at it, it does not look like P. Craig Russell stuff. He had not found his own style yet. But it's very short, just a setup for a fight and fight sequences. Another thing is they have Shiloh Temple Boxing by Frank McLaughlin. Frank McLaughlin was a martial arts expert who worked on a lot of the black and white magazines. He wrote articles, he drew things about how to actually use martial arts, and there was a special issue of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu that was just martial arts instruction that he did. I don't know much of what he did other than that. And then the last story is, again, another just short story setting up for some fight sequence. The next one is a story that tied into. It was the first appearance of Shang-Chi outside of his own book. It was Giant-Sized Spider-Man. And Giant-Sized Spider-Man was really more a Giant-Sized Marvel team-up. Every issue of Giant-Sized Spider-Man was a team-up of some kind. Second issue, it's Shang-Chi and Spider-Man. So this character's really driving sales, obviously. The story is very much a Marvel team-up issue. Fu Manchu has got some minions to dress up and say that they're working for Shang-Chi. They fight Spider-Man. There are some minions who fight Shang-Chi, say they're working for Spider-Man. They both say, oh, and he's going to destroy the power plant. so that Spider-Man and Shang-Chi fight in the power plant. They work out their differences, team up, and take down the bad guys. And stop.
You gotta be kidding.
And stop Fu Manchu's plans. It's written by Len Wein, drawn by Ross Andru, who were not the regular team on Spider-Man yet. Ross Andru was the regular Spider-Man penciler. Len Wein was not writing Spider-Man yet. He started with issue 151. This is a good Spider-Man story, but when I'm reading these in sequence, this really seems out of place. Len Wein didn't really grasp Shang-Chi other than kind of the superficial basics. He narrates his stories. He's really good. He hates it. He's fighting against his father. You don't get that philosophy in the narration that you get in the other Master of Kung Fu stories.
Although it was interesting watching Spider-Man's reaction to Fu Manchu. And Shang-Chi reaction, because this is really the first superhero he's actually been up against.
Yes.
But even Spider-Man's like, really? Fu Manchu? I thought he was a myth.
But the other thing I think is weird is he holds his own against Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is, has the strength of 10 men. So I don't know if that was to show Shang-Chi was, really powerful, or if it was just, we got pages to fill and we need a fight scene, and it would suck if it's Spider-Man punches him once and he's done.
Dr. Fu Manchu? Nah, it just couldn't be. That's what Spider-Man's saying as he's flying away.
And that could probably be their way of saying, people know he's a fictional character, but in the Marvel Universe, he's really kept to the background.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then the last issue that we're going to cover, because we're doing 10 issues at a time, is issue 22. Doug Mensch, Paul Gulacy, back on the book. Now, one of the things, if you notice, a few issues ago, I was going to note this, and I forgot to do so, because it does flip into the giant size issues. One of the things Marvel would do was have a paragraph on the splash page that sort of gives you everything you need to know about the book. And they had this on all of the comics when I started reading, so that when you picked up, it's like, oh, the X-Men. Well, who are these X-Men? Oh, they're hunted and feared by a world that they're sworn to protect. The one for Master of Kung Fu is, again, written in the first person. Call me Shang-Chi, as my father did, when he raised me and molded my mind and my body in the vacuum of his Honan, Chinen retreat. I learned many things from my father, that my name means the rising and advancing of a spirit, that my body could be forged into a living weapon through the discipline of Kung Fu, and that it might be used for the murder of a man named Dr. Petrie. Since then, I have learned that my father is Dr. Fu Manchu, the most insidiously evil man on earth, and to honor him would be nothing but a dishonor to the spirit of my name. Stan Lee presents Master of Kung Fu.
That Stan Lee was into everything.
This is also, one of the things to remember is all of these issues that we've talked about, Roy Thomas was editor-in-chief. And one of the things that Doug Mensch has talked about, and Don McGregor talked about, and Steve Gerber talked about, when you got a series as a writer, you were kind of in charge of that series. They would have assistant editors who were really just proofreaders. But you were told, don't get in trouble with the comics code. And if the sales on the book drop, you'll be replaced. If the sales on the book drop far enough, the book will be canceled. So there was a lot of creative anarchy at Marvel at the time. And it was a lot of once you got a job, you had a job unless you screwed it up. A lot of the younger writers would come in on the secondary books, like Master of Kung Fu or Werewolf by Night or Killraven or, Ant-Man or things like that. And you'd work on those books until, if your sales got big enough and you hit your deadlines, you'd get moved on to the bigger books, like Spider-Man, Thor, the Avengers, Hulk, things like that. Those were kind of considered the prestige books. And there was a kind of a thought at the time where the artist could kind of influence the sales, but the writer didn't really influence sales by who they were. It was more, oh, you're writing Spider-Man, therefore you're one of our top writers. Or, you've made Dracula sell well enough, we're going to move you on to Spider-Man because that's a book that sells better. So Doug Moench was still, even though Master of Kung Fu was selling really well, he was still doing the secondary series. He was doing this, he was doing Werewolf by Night and Deathlock. This issue starts with, we get a little bit, so that it's kind of tossed out there that, he's working at the docks. Still dressed.
Yeah. Ooh, that's got to be pretty rank by now.
Because of the whole Marvel costume thing, Shang-Chi has not changed out of his gi yet. By the premise, by the book. But they kind of throw a thing out there where, he's working at the docks, unloading boxes. Okay, there you go. Doesn't have a place to live. So he goes to a Chinese restaurant, and the owner is, of course, one of Fu Manchu's minions.
Of course.
And this is the first time we really, they hype the fact that these are sci-fan assassins. One of the things that's kind of odd is when they lost the rights to Fu Manchu, they couldn't use the term sci-fan assassins anymore. That's owned by the Saxe-Rohmer estate. But this is very much fight and philosophy. This is very much kind of a typical Master of Kung Fu story. Paul Gulacy's art is phenomenal in this. He's becoming even better at using shadow, using photo reference. Joe, turn to page 243.
I'm on it.
Third panel at the top. That's just beautiful. If you go back to like Gulacy's first issue to here, it's only like about a 4 or 5 month difference. But his rendering is so much better. His use of light and shadow is so much better than it was. He's using photo references. The figures aren't as twisted. Things seem more natural. And Fu Manchu's plot in this is he has kidnapped Blackjack Tar and Nayland Smith, and he's going to blow them up, basically. And Shang-Chi saves them. Tons and tons of fighting sequences here. And at the end, we find out that Fu Manchu was trying to destroy the what is that?
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore in South Dakota.
Which, if you know anything about Mount Rushmore, is pretty fucking impossible, short of using a nuke.
But, again, Munch has set down, all right, here's how the series is going to go. Fu Manchu is after Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is trying to undermine what his plans are, and Nayland Smith is kind of helping Shang-Chi to navigate the world. And that's really your first 10 issues. And it's not a huge change from the first issue to the 10th. But by the 10th issue, they've really kind of found where they're going to be. They found where the series is going to be kind of its bread and butter. And another thing is Moench has kind of set it up for a long run, whereas I thought Englehart was very much this isn't going to last long, so let's try and get everything out there as fast as we can. At this point, the series isn't really a classic, but it's building toward it. Joe, what are your overall feelings on the first 10 issues?
Well, except for the things I talked about, I actually enjoyed it. Because, like I said, this is one I never had read before. I was aware of, Fu Manchu, and I knew the character from, like I said, the Marvel team-up and the tail end of the series. So this was fun to read. I enjoyed it. And, other than the cliche of the first issue, I kind of liked it. I thought, for the most part, the fight scenes flowed pretty good. I think it's hard to convey kung fu fight scenes on paper, but for the most part, I think the artist nailed it. And it was, I don't know what they would do nowadays if they'd have like photo models or whatever ready to I don't know, make sure it looked right. But I thought it was enjoyable. And you know me, I hate buying omnibus. But this was actually one that was really worthwhile. It was a good idea. to finally get them that way. And I'll be curious to see what happens when the rights to Fu Manchu get into public domain. Will they continue some stories? Would a kung fu fight issues like that actually work in today's marketplace?
And they are using the character. They had him train Spider-Man. He had a mini-series during the Secret Wars thing. I think a lot of people at Marvel especially feel handcuffed that, okay, we can't use the Fu Manchu stuff.
Well, they did call him, what do they call him?
The Celestial one.
No, Zhang Zhu.
Oh, okay.
They use his name or something, and then they call him Mr. Han, the father, the devil doctor. So he's sort of around. I think they tried to bring him back in a zombie-type character, but I haven't read that, so I don't know.
And one of the things about it is the early novels are all public domain, but the Saxe-Romer estate has maintained trademark on the character. So when they do use him, there are supporting characters and ideas and things that they cannot use. They can't use the Sci-Fan Assassins. They can't use Nayland Smith or Dr. Petrie. They can't use his sister, who shows up later in the series. But they can use Blackjack Tar and other characters who show up. And what we're seeing in these early issues, to my mind, is it started as, okay, let's make it like a martial arts film, and meant just kind of feeling his way toward where it would be. And what I find very fascinating is how they're staying within that parameter. And the Marvel books had to have fight scenes back in the 70s because there was a feeling of if you didn't have a fight scene, people wouldn't buy the book. But he's moving toward more complex plots. He's moving toward more of the Fu Manchu is the mastermind behind the scenes. But one of the problems I'm seeing with these early issues is, okay, Fu Manchu's got this world-destroying plot, and we take care of it in 17 pages. Later on, the stories get longer and more complex. So all of the pieces are being put into place. Another thing that, because I came in much later in the series, when I'm reading the early issues, it's like, wow, where's this character? Where's this character? Where's this character? Because they're so integral to the series, you would think they had been there from the start. The omnibuses are some of the thinnest of the omnibuses. And they only go for about 600 to 700 pages, whereas most of the omnibuses that are $125 are more the 1,000-pagers. But a lot of that is they do have to pay for the Fu Manchu rights. And in the back, you've got ads, and you've got the ads that ran at the time showing how popular the character was. By 1975, they already had not an omnibus, a Treasury edition, which reprinted the first issue and then some of the stuff from Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. So I'm just kind of amazed at how quickly this character became popular. But there you go. That's the first 10 issues. We're going to do the next 10 issues probably within about a month or so. And if you have other series that you would like us to do spotlights on, please let us know. If you have feedback, if you have your own memories of Master of Kung Fu, send them. We will go over them in the next episode. And this is kind of the first one. So if there's stuff you like, stuff you don't like, let us know. And we'll be figuring our way out. Because, boy, if you listen to the first few episodes of Kray Z Comics and Stories, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, did we?
But we still sound the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening. We'll be back with another series in review.
Yes, here at Solitaire Rose Networks, we have ads. That's right, we have ads. Just like every other podcast. Come on, it's okay. Our first advertiser is our longest-running advertiser, and that's DreamHost.com. DreamHost.com is the best, bar none, web host all over the interwebs. You could go to other web hosts. You could go to the ones that have big ads on TV and everything, and they're not going to give you the service, the dependability, and the reliability of DreamHost. Head on over to DreamHost.com, use the code KRAYZ, K-R-A-Y-Z, and get $20 off your first year of web hosting. Another of our sponsors is Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club has great blades at low prices, and let's face it, you gotta shave. Head over to shaved.by/C19DC. Get you some blades. They're wonderful. I use them. I use all of our sponsors. Matter of fact, head on over to crazycomics.com. Over on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see all of our sponsors. Bombas, Grays, Flaviar, Dollar Shave Club, and DreamHost. If you would like to advertise on any of the podcasts in the Solitaire Rose Network, you can. Just email solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com, subject advertising.